Hope everybody is doing well. It is another blazing hot day out there. There is no doubt about that. And I was actually out there on July 1st, out there at the festival at the Eno, which was actually on my birthday on July 1st. And actually on July 4th, I might be out there as well, even though they're talking about 105 heat index and all in that space. But a lot of folks are paying attention to a number of things that are happening in the world, including this lovely weather that is apparently impacting the majority of the nation and all in that kind of way. So folks are paying attention to that. They're paying attention to some of the rulings that just came down from the Supreme Court, including some around affirmative action and around student loan forgiveness, and even around whether you can refuse somebody based on their orientation if you are a event planner or something along those lines, even though it's my understanding that the person that actually filed that case wasn't even in that particular industry, but that was the ruling that was given out. And of course, some people are also paying attention to what is happening over there in the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, and a number of other conflicts that are going on around the world, including things that are happening in France, as there was a incident involving a gentleman that was killed by the police forces over there. And now there are some folks that are feeling that it is a religious oriented attack and some other kinds of attacks in that space. So there are folks that are having conversations around that. And of course, we know that if you are a sports fan, a lot of people are paying attention to the players that are staying on their respective team, as is the case with Draymond Green, or going back to old teams that they used to be on, as is the case with Kyrie Irving, who is heading back to the Dallas Mavericks. And I actually will be interested to see how that plays out, since it's been a minute since my alma mater had a player that was drafted, but a player that used to play at Clemson, then played for a year at Marquette. Omax Prosper has gone and was recruited by one West Coast team and then was traded to the Mavericks. So who knows, he may be winding up playing with Kyrie Irving and all along those lines. But there's all kinds of things that are going on, including folks that are concerned about the mental health issues and a number of other things that are in that space. And I have a very dear friend that's going to come on and share some wisdom about a number of issues that are going on in that space and all along those lines. So it's always great when we can get Kelly Jones on and she can share some of the things that are happening in that space and all along those lines. One of the articles that you brought up really had me quite interested. Actually, there was a couple of the articles that you brought up that had me quite interested, but I saw that the North Carolina State Conference of the NAACP had joined forces to help children of colors with disabilities in the state foster care program get more community and home-based treatment instead of being warehoused in locked psychiatric facilities that can be dangerous. And I know that one of the things that I oftentimes get concerned about is how too often we are putting people on medications or doing things along those lines, when in a lot of ways I feel that kids just naturally are hyperactive. And as I've told you before, I don't have any kids of my own, but I do have my two nephews. They love their video games, they love their Oculus, they love a number of other things, and sometimes they just are hyperactive. And I'm not saying that Ritalin can't be used, but I sometimes feel that it is too overly used and all in that space. So when you brought up that idea of folks literally being warehoused, and I saw that a Republican candidate was concerned that we were warehousing some migrants as well. So he was making a whole stink about that, because apparently that's down in Greensboro, where they are going to put some in what was a former, I think, Hebrew school or something like that. And now they are saying that it's going to be a place that the migrants are going to stay until they find permanent home, wherever that may be, and all along those lines. But I know we were talking about that on the news show earlier today and all in that space, because I didn't even know that we were confining these disability folks with disabilities into these kind of facilities and all in that space. But I always love having you on, because you always give us such great insight. So I can't wait to hear about some of these things that are going on that you have brought up, including how Canada is doing in some of these regards as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no doubt. Glad to have you. Glad to have you share some of this great knowledge that you have got and all in that space. So, how many kids are we talking about? I guess we'll start with the warehouse, but I definitely want to get to the other issues as well. But how many kids are actually being warehoused in this kind of way and everything? Because I know that a lot of times people are worrying about folks that are being tucked away and they don't always know where they are, even in that space. So is this a prevalent situation?
The warehousing as well as mental health in general are a challenge right now. One of the biggest things is when you look at, let's say, a diagnosis such as autism, right?
Hmm.
And they could be warehoused in the school, meaning like pushed aside, or they can be warehoused in an external facility. But when you look at something, let's say, such as autism, in 2000, we had a rate of 1 to 150 in the United States. That was in 2000. We are in 2023, and we now have a rate of 1 in 36 individuals are being diagnosed with autism. So when this diagnosis comes about, there's greater concern because upon graduation, there is an 85% unemployment rate for individuals with autism.
Well, that's
So, I mean,
amazing.
that's just autism. I mean, when you look at, autism, OCD, depression, etc., the United States is the largest country out of the top 30 countries, top in the top 30, is the largest state to for depression. I mean, the largest country. I'm sorry, largest country for depression. So we have a greater amount of depression than any of the other larger established countries out there.
Oh,
So when you talk about being warehoused, we're concerned about being warehoused in facilities, but we're also concerned about being warehoused in society and
yeah.
not giving individuals an opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, and one of the things I know a lot of people have been concerned about, I have friends of mine that are definitely the parents of young kids. I know that my nephews will be turning 14 and 15 in the month of August, so next month and all in that kind of way. But suicide has definitely been rising among the teenagers and young adults and all in that kind of way. So I was wondering, do we have any ideas or any thoughts as to why those numbers are going up? I know a lot of people were concerned that there was a lot of social isolation during the pandemic that didn't help at all. But I was just wondering what's going on in that space because I do think it's something that is impacting our community, meaning the African American and Native American and Hispanic communities, maybe even more than some of the other communities.
Well, Native American typically has the highest rate of has a larger rate of suicide. But I will say this: there is an uptick, a 60% uptick in African American males between ages of, I think it's 10 to 19, as far as suicide is concerned. As far as girls in general, not any race in particular, girls in general, there's a 1 in 3 rate. One in every 3 girls, adolescent girls, has suicidal ideations. When I was doing my research to find out a little bit more about the suicide and the cause and etc., the rate of suicide for African Americans is we don't know the full number. The reason why we don't know the full number is because the medical examiners and the coroners say that there's a 2 to 3 times higher rate of African Americans being, the notation being undetermined cause of death, because we don't have a medical history. Like, we're not going to doctors getting medical notes. There's no suicide note. If there is a suicide note, the coroners and whomever else, they don't see it. So they're guesstimating that there's a 2 to 3 times higher rate of suicide amongst African Americans than what's actually being reported. So when you say what is one of the reasons why we're seeing such a high rate, is once again it goes back to the fact that there aren't those medical notes. I'm not sure if you saw the case about April Burrell. Did you see that?
Hmm. Yes.
Phenomenal, right? 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So there was a young lady who was a valedictorian in school. She was doing very well in college. She had a traumatic event. And after that traumatic event, she wound up going to see a psychiatrist, and she spent 20 years in a catatonic state. Afterwards, there was a neurologist that came to see her when she was first admitted. He knew that she was a valedictorian. He knew about the challenges that she was facing, etc. 20 years later, his protege went to see her, and he said, wait a minute, this lady's in the same exact state. Maybe it's something other than psychiatry. Maybe we need to look at some more things. So they brought in a team of 70 global neurologists to uncover that it was actually lupus that she had.
Oh,
I
wow.
still Yes. And so guess what? Within like, I don't know, it was like 3 months or something like that. She went to rehab, she's out, she's on her own, she's doing, she's doing things independently. But think about that, 20 years in a catatonic state under antipsychotic drugs because there was no tracking of what was going on, no progression tracking of what was going on with this young lady. And so one of the things with regards to African Americans is yes, mental health checks, etc., but we also need to start to chronicle the things that we're going through. That's why I wrote the book, For It Is Tangible, because it's tangible to chronicle what's going on. Because we don't have those notes, when we go into a clinician, there's a 50% diagnostic error rate because people have not chronicled their condition. There's
Well,
a 50%, 56% out of the 12 million, 7 to 12 million cases of individuals that are being misdiagnosed, 56% are because clinicians do not have the historical data for the patients. I have that, it's on my website, the
well,
actual source. So
it's a
said, with that being said, because we're not chronicling it, right? Either writing it down or telling people or taking notes, when we go in to see a clinician, they're looking at the outward expression, the social behavior, and they're diagnosing. You think about it when you talk about like autism, right? Autism, three key things, three key reasons or three key items people can be diagnosed with autism: social isolation, social isolation. There we go. Social isolation, repetitive actions, and also impaired communication. Those are all social.
mhm.
Those are all social. And guess what? Social things can happen based on the day. If I face a traumatic event, if I lose a loved one, I could be more prone to exhibit those behaviors because those are social behaviors. And
Right.
so what we have to do is we have to start going deeper, like they did with April Burrell, to go deeper. Whenever something happens within our community, we automatically send somebody to a psychiatrist. Well, there's psychologists, there's hematologists, there's neurologists, there's so many other people that can give us a more comprehensive scope of what's going on. Um, I have it in my
And
number somewhere, but
yeah,
the
but Kelly,
what's
is
the
that part of the isn't part of the problem that we as minorities sometimes have a fear of going to psychologists? I mean, we're not that great with going to doctors in the first place, but definitely when it comes to going to folks that are going to be dealing with the emotional and mental well-being, sometimes we feel that we can do well on our own, and sometimes we depend on institutions that tell us everything will be all right in the by and by, using kind of the religious terminology that some of our religious leaders use, and all in that space. So, is it part of the problem that we aren't encouraged enough to get this kind of care at a early age, much less in the later years as well?
I think it's twofold. I think it's
Okay,
one, there's a historical component when you think about the Tuskegee experiment and
right.
you think about other travesties that happen when people go to clinicians, they get an adverse diagnosis, and then there's that stereotype at school, there's stereotype with friends, etc., etc. So I think that that's one of the challenges is some of the historical, the historical component of it. But then also, I think one of the challenges is, we just got $1 billion in with regards to, the medical expansion for the state. Medicaid, people have access to more opportunities to go to clinicians, right? Going to a clinician, but going to the wrong clinician doesn't always help.
Right.
So for me, I mean, I'm a cerebral aneurysm survivor. And so when I went to the doctors, I had healthcare insurance. The first thing they did was they told me that I had vision problems and that I had allergies. So I spent 6 consecutive weeks going to the doctors being told I had vision problems and allergy problems versus the fact that I had an aneurysm. So I think one of the second challenge is, once again, what I was saying beforehand is it's not so much a matter of going to a doctor and getting a mental health diagnosis, because if you go to the doctor and get the mental health diagnosis because they're looking at a snapshot of who you are, right? Because you don't have the historical data, you may not have certain medical records, etc. It can be a challenge to move forward.
Yeah,
So
definitely would be.
I think that one of the greatest strengths that we can have, once again, is to start to chronicle stuff for ourselves so that we can take tangible evidence to the doctors, take tangible evidence to the teachers. One of the things that I found in interviewing people, and you'll see in some of my videos on my website, is that a lot of times the way a person presents at the psychiatrist, psychologist in that office is completely different from the way they present at home. There's a
Right.
gentleman, his name is Tom Stoltman, and he is a two-time world's strongest man winner, award winner, right? He was the strongest man in the world twice. And he is actually a person who's been diagnosed with autism.
Hmm.
And his mom would take him to school and take him to the doctors, and he would just act a fool, right? And and the doctor would say, well, he can't do, and the teacher would say he can't do. So what she did was she started to record him, doing things, and through those recordings, she was able to go back to the clinician and say, hey, look, you know what? This is what my son can do, or this is what my son is capable of doing. So I think
Yeah.
that, going to a clinician, yes, I understand, we need to go to a clinician, we need to get help, but let's make sure that we're going and getting that second opinion or going and getting a comprehensive look. The other thing that I'll tell you is that 66% of individuals who go back for a second opinion wind up getting a change diagnosis, or the first diagnosis was removed, because like I said, some things are situational. You could have not had breakfast that morning, or you could have done poorly on an exam, or your boyfriend could have broken up with you, or there are situational things that happen that impact our overall response, and some things we don't even realize them, because as you said, we have that superhuman um, facade where we say, oh no, that doesn't really bother me, or that didn't really bother me, but internally and cognitively it is challenging me. So what I present, or what I state that I'm presenting, could be completely different.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm one most
Now,
talkative, Mark. I told you that, right?
no, that's all right. I'm gonna enjoy the talkative aspect and the conversation, and I'm loving with the information that you're bringing out and all in that space. But I know one of the organizations that you are associated with, and some people will hear the acronym and not know what the acronym means. They'll think of it as being the cute and cuddly animal and all in that space. But for those that are watching that have heard about pandas and are wondering what is a panda when it comes to this kind of work, maybe if you could share a little bit about that organization and exactly what a panda is for those that are watching that may not have an idea. I did some research, so I have an idea, but now some folks are watching, they're probably going
Yes,
like,
yes.
"What's a
So
panda?"
pandas, I've been working with Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you.
So
Yes.
I've been working with pandas since 1999, when my second son was born, but I also knew about it with my first son. So pans and pandas, they're a little bit different. Pans um, is oh God, I forget what the acronym is, but I know exactly what it is. So PANS is the one that is not associated with strep. PANDES is associated with strep. So PANS is more or less when you have an adverse social behavior, and it's a full throttle expression. So for instance, you and I could be talking, and then all of a sudden I reach out and I lunge and I try to attack you. What happens is there are certain viruses that a person can have. They can have, um, strep, chicken pox, just different viruses in their system. And what happens is your system is not able to fully your system goes into hyperactive mode, so it's not able to fully control itself as it's going out and cleaning out the virus. And what it actually does is start to attack some of the healthy brain cells. And so what happens is when it attacks those healthy brain cells, your mode of processing, instead of like going driving a manual car, going first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, you go straight from first gear to fifth gear. And that fifth gear is based on fear, anxiety. It's based on probably the worst case scenario. So that's a little bit about PANS. And so when I say PANS and PANDAS are different. So my older son Jay, when he was born with forceps. So imagine the prongs pulling him out of his head, pulling him out. That is trauma. And he was born with these little red blotches on his face called pataki. So his challenges in processing things his cognitive processing is not necessarily based on like a strep virus. It's based on the fact that there was already trauma, which was never resolved, physical or emotional trauma. The second thing is my son Noah, he was born, and then based on his exposure to, um, you know, uh, strep or certain viruses, he wound up all of a sudden starting to have lots of sinus infections, like ear infections, lots of nasal congestion, allergies, and all this other kind of stuff. And as we began to take him to the neurologist, the ENT, the general practitioner, remember multiple physicians, we found out what was truly going on was, please forgive me, pandas. As I said,
So that was actually the pandas
okay,
in
just
that
had to plug it
particular
in real
case.
quick. So the what?
That's it. So yeah, that
So
was
with
the.
IgA, I'm sorry, my
Mhm.
So with the IgA level, what happens is, IgA is a part of your antibodies, and that is specifically targeted on your nose, your gut, your chest. So when you have, exposure to like pneumonia and, like I said, those viruses, what will happen is the IgA will kick in, knock it out, synapses will clean it up, and it's out of your system.
So,
But when you don't have the IgA in your system, your body goes to IgM. Some people are not born with IgA. You can develop it over time, but sometimes moms don't pass down the IgA to their fetus. So
mhm.
if the IgM kicks in, IgM is a broader sweep, right? IgM is bacteria, it's a broader sweep. So because IgM is a broader sweep, it's not going specifically into that sinus, gastrointestinal, and lung area. And that's where some of the challenges come in, and that's where I said it can start to attack healthy brain cells, etc. So I hope I didn't go too deep.
No, that was very deep, and I enjoyed it. We got to get deep into these things and all in that space. I know that you also done a lot of work in the political lanes and all in that space. But do you feel that we are having our parties, be that the Democratic Party, which I know you are a part of, or the other parties, deal enough into these mental health issues? I know I hear them talk a lot of times about mental health and the importance of mental health, but I don't know that they do much more than lip service in terms of actually doing the work and making sure that we are addressing these very important issues. And like I said earlier, the pandemic definitely exposed some of what is going on into our mental health lanes. But how are we doing as a country? I know you mentioned some other countries are doing better, but how are we doing as a country, and how are our politicians doing in terms of addressing this very important issue?
You know what the funniest thing is, so New Jersey and Maryland are the two areas I work with where my son's got a lot of the treatment done, and everything was, just rolling, rolling, rolling. Um, the doctor that I went to in New Jersey, I don't know how, nothing but God, he only worked with physicians and professional athletes. So, his exposure to pandas and moving the needle ahead was ahead of some of the others. And once again, in Maryland, that's where they began the research on pandas. When I came to North Carolina, I got upset because everybody could only say autism. Like when I said pandas, nobody understood it. They only understood autism. They understand PDD-NOS. Nothing, was just autism, autism, autism. And then, I don't know if you know this, but I'm certified to write a curriculum for individuals with autism. Did you know that?
Okay. I did not
So I
know
have
that.
two, okay, so I have two teach certifications, et cetera, et cetera. So the point that I'm getting to is with teach, one of the things that they teach us is that you can't come in with expectations of anyone, right? Because once you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. They all vary,
Right.
right? And the parents vary too, believe it or not. But the bottom line is, if I am, um, able to say to work with a person with a learning disability and say, hey, look, I have no expectations. Let's go in. Let's find out what you know. I think we have to give politicians that grace.
Yeah.
I think that politicians have a lot on their plate, and pandas may not be one of the things that's top of mind.
Mhm.
If we are in a society where clinicians are older, physicians are older, a lot of times they're just doing what's worked in the past. You know what I mean? Stamp, keep it going, stamp, keep it going, stamp, keep it going. Because in the past, we were a fee-based society. Fee-based means The more clients I see, the more money I make. So when you come in, I'm just trying to give you a band-aid, get you out in 15 minutes and get the next customer in, because I get these, I get extra funds, etc., based on how many people that I bring in from the health insurance companies, that kind of stuff. Extra funds. Now we've moved to a value-based, not everybody, a value-based method with the life insurance, health insurance companies. And so because we moved to a value-based care, that means that goes back to chronological history, which some of us don't have. When I go to the doctors, he's looking at my history, he's looking at my medical records, he's looking at my, social habits, like am I playing a sport where I could get a concussion? So he or she is looking at the whole picture, right? And so when they look at a person, they are doing what is called value-based care. So what I'm doing is I'm doing things proactively so that you don't catch diabetes like your other family members, or so that you don't have cancer like your other family members. So it's more of a proactive approach, because we're looking at the economic burden. So, the economic burden, and I just use autism because I had preached autism for so long in the South, because like I said, that's what they understand. So, I mean, that's what people feel most comfortable with. People feel very, very comfortable with the word autism in the South. Is if you look at the economic burden for autism, for adults, it's 176 to, I think it's 176 to 196 billion dollars a year.
Oh wow.
If you look at it for children, it's 61 to 66 billion dollars a year, right? The overall economic burden for mental health in the United States is 332, 39, I think 34th. No, I'm sorry. I think it's shoot. I don't have the number in front of me, so I don't want to. I think it's. No, I'm sorry. I don't want to give the number because I don't want to give the wrong number. But the bottom line is, autism is supposed to be kind of like half. But the bottom line is, when you've got 33 billion, and you've got that number's not right. That number's not right. I have to get you that number. That's the number. I'm sorry. 33 billion is spent on antipsychotic drugs. That's what the number is. 33 billion is spent on antipsychotic drugs each year. Right. There we go. The estimated toll of mental health for the United States is 1 trillion. There we go. Just so many numbers going on. Okay. So yeah, it's 1 trillion. So when you got, 1 trillion in mental health, please forgive me, in economic burden for mental health, I forgot what I was saying. So when you've got those kinds of numbers going on, you've got a lot of patients coming in with mental health conditions. So sometimes if you don't have the chronological history, if you don't have the medical history, if people are not fully disclosing what happened last week, what happened last month, what kind of injuries they have on them, then a clinician may be like, you know what? Let's just rubber stamp this autism. We know that something's wrong. Let's go with autism and keep it going so I can get my other patients in. So yeah, so that's where the challenge is. So once again, I just want to say it's 176 to 196 billion for adults with autism. It's 61 to 66 billion for kids with autism. It's 33 billion for antipsychotics each year, and the total economic burden for mental health is 1 trillion. There we go.
Wow. And I know you've been talking a lot about how ADHD is very manageable, and some people are trying to manage it with natural cures and other things in that space. But I'm just wondering what kind of suggestions would you have in order for people to manage those things, whether it's ADHD or autism or a number of other things that are out there, as one that's had to deal with this as a parent of folks that are dealing with that as well, and as a advocate for folks that are dealing in that space also. So what kind of ways would you recommend for people to manage if they are facing that, since it is manageable?
First thing, chronicle. I mean, even when your child is heavy, is healthy, when your child's healthy, chronicle everything that's going on. Because when you go to the doctor, whatever doctors, they're going to need that information. So there are different routes that can be taken. I mean, for some kids, it may be the antipsychotics. For some kids, it may be a homeopathic method. For some kids, it may be IVIG, and for other kids, it may be plasmapheresis. And I'll give you an example. And there's a huge difference between plasmapheresis and IVIG. So they both deal with plasma, but plasmapheresis is kind of like a washing of your own plasma. IVIG is an infusion from someone else, an infusion of someone else's blood, so that you can build up your IgA, IgM, IgG levels, your antibodies. So your autoimmune system. So basically, with regards to IVIG and plasmapheresis, I've been talking to a couple of people with SPS. Are you familiar with SPS?
Not
Stiff
familiar with
person
that.
syndrome. Okay, stiff person syndrome. It looks exactly like a seizure, but it's not a seizure. And if you give a person with stiff person syndrome seizure medicine, it's actually going to make their condition worse. So SPS is brought on by stress. So it's like full truncal, like loss of control, hypertonia, where you don't have control of your body, distortion of face, kind of like a Bell's palsy, can lead to like a Bell's palsy, and then a final collapse, right? A person can pull themselves out of this seizure or this, I'm sorry, from out of SPS with positive thinking. So if you're able to take this situation, what I used to do with some of my clients is I would have them count. So like
Right.
if something's going on, yeah, count. Start with 100, go 100, 99, 98, 97, 96, 95, 94. And as you're counting, you'll be able to cool down. So whatever it takes to process it. For some people, they have to think of the beach, whatever it works for them. But the bottom line is, if you give a person with SPS, IVIG, they'll have please forgive me, they'll have, acne and different other side effects because their body can't process that intrusion of someone else's blood.
All
But
right.
if you give them plasmapheresis, then it actually enables them to restore cognition and all the rest. One of the original goals that I was working with our team on was trying to build a facility that would address social, physical, cognitive skill strengthening. It was called Beyond My Expectations. It's a vision, a dream, who knows, I want to do it, I want to do it, I want to do it. So people want to leave and whatever. The point is, with Beyond My Expectations, the reason why I wanted to do that facility is because even if you give someone plasmapheresis, the next dose might be 6 weeks. The next dose might be 6 months. The way that you have lesser need of dosage or less frequency in needing of these dosages is if you exercise, because the endorphins you get from exercise enables your blood to stay at a more of a homeostasis level. Exactly. You think about it, trauma challenges you, but also exercise provides those endorphins where you have that happy moment. So people say when you're stressed, exercise. So if you
Yep.
exercise with SPS or any of these mental health conditions, what actually happens is you you further extend your best state, if that makes any sense. So you prolong the need for medication or supplements, etc. I know with my children we did sulfur, and sulfur was phenomenal.
Yeah, I've heard people saying great things about sulfur and the use of sulfur and all in that space. I also know that you have worked in the past, particularly with the university that you were associated with and everything, the athletes. And a lot of times we don't think about the mental health of athletes, but you had some very interesting statistics around that as well. So I'd love to hear more some of that conversation because I know that that can be a issue. We've been hearing a lot of conversation around opioids, but it's not just opioids; it's a number of other things because sports can be very much of a anxiety-ridden field and everything. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about the ways that we can work to help our athletes that are going through a lot in terms of their own mental health. And I think you even mentioned some famous cases like Ray Rice and Marion Jones and Jovian Belcher, just to name a few.
Yeah. So one of the things that I found was it's like a 52% rate over their lifetime of individuals who played in the NFL that have misused opioids. And one of the things that you have to think of is, you're playing, you've got a contract, and you want to make sure that you get as much time as possible so that you can play again. And this is, they're taking the opioids to address musculoskeletal injuries. So uh, that's one of the challenges. Opioid, I think sometimes people don't really understand where the abuse comes in. So opioids can be used for 3 to 5 days, but after those 3 to 5 days, then your body starts to develop a tolerance. So when you use an opioid, what happens is it gives you those endorphins. It gives you that happy feeling, like exercise, etc. And it gives you that ability to manage pain. But after 5 days, your body starts to adjust and it stops producing the endorphins that it was producing originally, because it knows that it has these opioids over here that are going to fill in the gap. So what happens is individuals who are taking opioids, after 3 to 5 days, they're like, wait a minute, I'm starting to feel this pain. It's a little bit stronger than it was beforehand. So let me get more opioids, right? Or let me get fentanyl, or let me crush it. And crush, the reason why they crush is because they think that they can get it in their system sooner and it will help them. But actually, those are the things that lead to, further complications and, addiction and sometimes fatality. They were saying that there's one particular drug that is Benethol, something like that, is used to address opioid addiction, and it's only offered at 1/4 of the facilities for young adults. So the opioid addiction facilities, it's only offered at 1/4 of those facilities. So if the prescribed, FDA approved drug is only offered at 1/4 of those facilities, what do you think is happening to these other kids that go to the other 3/4 of the facilities for addiction challenges? So
Excuse me.
yes, opioids is a huge challenge. Once again, steady increase in use, because people say, hey, look, you know what? I'm going through some challenges. I have some physical, social, whatever challenges, and this is what will make me happier and able to present.
Yeah. I can definitely see that being an issue and everything. You have a great video that you presented that I was going to share, and before I share it and I'll grib it and everything, definitely there is a very important group of folks that help in what we are doing. That is the special education teachers and also the special education teacher assistants and all in that space. So as you were talking, I was actually doing some digging of one of your videos and all in that space. So I was just gonna share this lovely video that you did, that you got a chance to share your thoughts about the special education teachers, and I'm thinking it is with one of the special education teachers themselves and everything along those lines. But if you want to give some maybe thoughts around that and how the importance of these amazing people are, before maybe I play a little bit of that video, it's a short video, and all in that space, because they are wonderful folks, and I definitely have had educators in my own space that have worked with special education people. So I was looking at your website and was like, that's a lovely video, and she's over there talking to this amazing lady that is a special education teacher and all in that space. So, do you have any thoughts about the importance of these folks in the special education space?
Okay, so I'm not sure which video you're talking about, but I thank you, because I really do admire people in special education. One of the things that we have to realize is that when kids have a learning disability or have challenges, they gravitate to somebody. That person who's there with them in school really and truly becomes an integral part of their success, because they have to trust someone to move forward. If I don't trust you, I'm going to block you out, and you can say whatever you want, but I'm going to keep going over here. That's one of the traits of individuals with learning disabilities or learning challenges. So when you have a person, and also, I'm sorry, and also they're very intuitive. So individuals with learning disabilities, they know right away if you like them or not, or if you don't like them. They also hear everything that you're saying. So if all of a sudden they become a challenge to you, that's because they heard you say something whereas you didn't believe in them.
Wow.
So when you find a special educator who speaks life into a child, that child will produce for them. Also, like like I said, if you have a special educator who doesn't preach life into them, that child, like if you think you and I are talking, Mark, you and I are just talking, and we say, oh, Johnny doesn't know anything, but I'll just go ahead and sit over there with him. Johnny's not going to produce for me, and Johnny's going to have an attitude because you didn't believe in him. And so a lot of times we think that they don't hear, they hear everything, they know everything. And so the reason why I highlighted whichever person it is that you're talking about is because I could hear them say that they cared about kids. And if you care, once again, you can produce major results.
Oh yeah, you can definitely show those major results and show how much you care and all along those lines. And sometimes people don't oftentimes do enough of that. I know that I was talking on one of our other shows. There is a young lady that is in the fashion lane, and she's going to be doing an autism event because she is raising some kids with autism, and it was going to be using fashion. I want to say it's this coming weekend that they're going to be doing that event there in Raleigh, and it's the second time that they've done the event. And I know Bright Star has done some work using horse therapy and animal therapy. So there are different ways that you can reach the kids that folks may not always consider. I also have a friend of mine that has a thrift store in Raleigh that is actually having the hiring. And I know that that was another point of the conversations that you have shared with me is the hiring rates of some of the folks that are facing mental illness and all in that space. So if you can speak to that, and then I'll play that video that I was referring to in a minute. But I do know that one of the things in my back and forth notes that you talked about was the hiring aspect of what goes on with those with ADHD as well as autism, as well as just mental health in general. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that because it sounds like some very stark figures in terms of employment and retention and all in that space.
Yes. As far as autism is concerned, there's an 85% unemployment rate. As far as OCD is concerned, there is a 85% unemployment rate. Unemployment rate. OCD is 30% unemployment plus 17% of individuals with OCD, HD, um, need to double check. OCD, ADHD, they make 17% less. So yeah, I just want to double check that number because I
Yeah.
hate giving out false information. But the bottom line is, um, they have a harder chance of being employed or finding employment, which could lead to lesser income, which could also lead to homelessness. And the
Mhm.
reason why I bring that up is because I follow, like, look at everything. Um, in Canada, over 50% of the residents support euthanasia for individuals with autism and learning disabilities that are homeless. So and some that are homeless and some that are not, but they're supporting. It's like 27% support individuals that are homeless, 28% support people just in general that have a learning disability. So they're supporting euthanasia for that group. In the Netherlands, last year they provided assisted suicide euthanasia for 40 individuals with mental health challenges. So I don't know what's next. We don't know what's down the pike, but we know that we need to start to become aware and become proactive in this situation.
No, no
Because
doubt
if
about
one
that.
kid
But
right now, huh?
I'm saying, but what is their reasoning behind that? I mean, unless they're doing the whole, survival of the fittest kind of mentality, which I don't think is a fair thing to do to those that are facing things like homelessness and mental challenges and a number of other things. But you do have some people out there that have a Darwinistic mindset and all along those lines. So unless that's their reasoning, I can't think of a reason that would be fit, and I don't even think that the Darwin reason is fit, but that's just my own personal opinion and all into that space. But what would be the reasoning for just kind of because it's almost like throwing away people because they are different and because they are facing an adversity of one sort or another. And I thought Canada and definitely the Netherlands were supposed to be more advanced than that. But like I said, I only have a few friends from those select places and everything. But that it sounds very scary in a lot of ways. So I'd love to hear what you're hearing their reasoning was in that regards.
just based on mental health diagnosis. If you have a mental health diagnosis and you feel as though you are ready to have support with suicide, you can. Once again, like I said, that was so. Let me give you this: when you look at the list of individuals or list of countries with mental adverse, please forgive me, autism. Just going to take autism first. You look at the countries with autism. It's the U.S. has the is the country with the fourth largest autism rate. Right, we're 1 in 44, whereas like I think it's like France and some of the other countries are like 100 and I mean 1 in 144. I have a list of those countries. Hold on, I'm sorry. I just
No problem.
here we go. Yeah, can't remember everything. France is 1 in 144. Italy is 1 in 139. Germany is 1 in 139. Spain is 1 in 137, and the U.S. is 1 in 44 with regards to autism. So autism is the fourth highest country with autism. The Netherlands is the fifth highest, and Canada is the eighth highest with regards to autism. When you look at ADHD, and it was ADHD that has a 30% unemployment and 17% lower salary. So when you look at ADHD, the Netherlands has a 1.57 rate of ADHD, their population 1.57. Canada has a I'm sorry, 1.57 for adults, 2.5 for children. Canada has 4.6 for adults and 5.7 for children. The US has 4.4, a ratio of 4.4, right, for adults, and for children, 9.4%.
Yeah. So almost 1 out of 10.
So when you look at the US, you see we have much higher rates as far as mental health than other countries. And other countries are already using drastic measures to control their populations, such as, like I said,
Right.
euthanasia or approving euthanasia. So that's why I say, we really got to get on the ball with figuring out what exactly providing clinicians as much information as possible. Because right now we have people they identified after the April Burrell case where she was in the catatonic state for 20 years, etc. The doctors went back and they found 200 other individuals listed as severe mental health, severe psychiatric patients that actually had a neurological condition and could be 100% cured.
Do you ever have any fear? Because I do follow, and it's just me personally, some of the science fiction, and some people would call it dystopian narratives and everything. But Kelly, do you ever have a fear that if certain policies are instituted, that the U.S. could go down a path where it's not just assisted suicide in the sense of the people wanting to check themselves out of life and all in that space, but it could be almost kind of a Kervokian, I think I said the name of that medical doctor that had helped with suicides and everything, where it could be the government itself kind of like saying, hey, look, y'all people are no good. Y'all people are homeless. You people are mentally ill. So therefore, we really don't need you. And since we don't need you, we will go ahead and eliminate you, which is kind of that dystopian fear that some folks have as well. So do you have any fear that those kind of policies could be instituted, or would there be enough of a uproar from our citizens to make that not happen?
I think you know what I think I go with AEMM, right? We need awareness, we need education, we need a mandate, and we need measurement. So I think that before I tell you that, let me tell you this number really quickly. In 2020, the antipsychotic industry was $11.2 billion, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 2023, the antipsychotic drug industry is $29.5 billion. So it's basically tripled.
Right. Wow.
So when it triples, people have revenue quotas and things that they need to meet too. So we have to make sure that once again, we're giving clinicians, once again, like I said, all the information that they need to make the proper diagnosis. Do I think that people could be discarded? I don't think that, and maybe it's just me, I don't think that it would be intentional. I think what happens is the doctors are supposed to see like 20 patients a day, right? Some doctors have 51, 56 patients that they see a day. So when you have 56 patients that you see a day, 5 days a week, maybe Saturday morning, you have a lot on your plate. And not to say that I don't like you, Mark, and I might think you're the coolest person in the world, but I got 50 people that I need to see, which I should be seeing in a time period where I need to see 20 people, right? So if you don't come to me with as much data as possible, I have to use my past experience, or I have to use a general observation to diagnose you to get to the next patient.
No, and I hear what you're saying, Kelly. But I guess my fear and my question, I'm not saying that we would go that route, but it could be scary depending on who comes into office because they might have some different thoughts and everything. But just like they have eliminated, or in some cities, including here in the Triangle area, eliminated some of the homeless communities that were outside and all in that space, you could see them literally doing that in terms of taking people out of this planet and out of this earth and everything. Because if we're not paying enough attention to them in those environments and are just kind of disregarding them in that situation, what would stop an extreme version of that from happening and folks not paying attention? For example, if you are here and you see a group of homeless people that are in camp and then they disappear, you would probably, and not you personally, Kelly, because you're a very compassionate person, but a lot of people would probably be like, I don't know where they're going, and I really don't care. They're not serving, they're not harassing me, or they're not panhandling me, and they're not a thing that I am as concerned about. And now that they are gone, I don't know why they left. Maybe they moved. They might have a kind of answer of that nature and everything, that they might not be as concerned in that space, depending on who's in control and what their intentions are. So
But
that
Mark,
would be
I go back to, just as I said, clinicians are busy. Just as I said, clinicians are busy, people are busy. And
correct.
I think what we have not done enough of is awareness and education. And awareness and education are two completely different things. So
Right.
awareness is kind of like, do you remember, like, they don't do a lot of it now, but remember, like, I was there when Noah built the ark, so we're talking a long, long time ago. But when we were younger, and you would get these coming soons,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the coming soon notices.
Mm-hmm.
That's the awareness piece that goes out to the general public, right? That's the curiosity. Okay, like kind of like the trailer for the movie, like, oh my god, what's the movie going to be about? Da, 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 da. So it is the awareness of the fact that there is an issue, right? The
Yeah.
awareness is just a simple fact that, you know what, not everything is autism. Not all things can be decided by one psychiatrist. That's
Yeah. Agree.
awareness, right?
Yeah.
Then there's
Yeah. I
the
definitely agree.
education component, and the education component is, I go to your school, I go to your church, I go to your organization, and I sit down and I talk to you about why you need to look at more than a psychiatrist or a neurologist. So some of my friends, or some of the people I know, honestly speaking, they may listen to a portion of this interview, but they may not listen to the whole thing, because people are just, they're going. And when they
Right.
listen to like my podcast, or when they listen to other things, they're looking for awareness, right?
No.
They're looking for
Yeah.
the big picture. But
Yeah.
I sneak in, I sneak in, I sneak in the education, because hopefully they'll come back and listen to it again and again and again to get the education piece. But
No,
we've
the
got to
education
do
piece is
more
great.
for the education piece. When you think about how a lot of us grew up, and this is across nationalities. So I mean, like, I remember when I was in New Jersey, I went to a Passover dinner, right? It's Jewish. And when I was in New Jersey, we had the Irish beer and all that stuff from my Irish friends, and we had, you know, um, some great Italian food and Portuguese food, and and Jamaican food, and there were all these cultural things where we sat down and had dinner and talked, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now a lot of times things are fast food. We don't do as much, and even when we're cooking, sometimes it's not just us in the kitchen. It's like 3-4 people in the kitchen cooking and talking. So there needs to be that education component that gets people to the next level. And I don't think we're sitting down and talking about it. So, okay, yeah, there's awareness. Okay, yeah, I heard about it on the news. I heard what Mark said. I heard what Kelly said. Okay, awareness. But awareness does not give me the empathy to go to the polls and make a difference.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. That empathy is a important part of the conversation, and we don't get enough of that. And if you were there when Noah was building the ark, I must have been there when he was getting the wood and all in that space, because I was even there a little bit even earlier than you were, and all along those lines. But that being said, I do remember some of those signs that you are talking about, because I do remember the kind of like the signs that you would get even when there was going to be a party, say at Duke or UNC or a number of other places, and it'd be like those kind of like underground messages that would be out in like the underpasses and the other passes that you knew somebody was about to come, that was going to get you excited about them arriving, whether that was a rap artist or a blues artist or a R&B artist or whatever. But there was that underground kind of communications that I don't know I see as much of. I might see an occasional message on some of the Duke grounds or other grounds, but not as much as we used to see them. So I do think that that's something we've got to get back to. But you brought up another point that I was finding fascinating about the empathy and the communication and sitting down to dinner, because I definitely had that same environment. Parents were oftentimes having conversations about civil rights, about issues growing up in rural North Carolina, and a number of other things, and we'd all be sitting there. But there are too many distracting factors, because how many times, Kelly, have you been out, either when you've done consulting to a restaurant, and seen the family that is there, the four of them or the five of them together, but you might as well say that there are 15 of them there together, because all of them are on their various devices talking to their three or four friends that are not paying attention to the folks that are actually in the circle with them, and all in that space. So that's something that I get frustrated by sometimes. I don't go up there and talk to them about it, but it does
So
get
I missed a part of
frustrating.
it.
Can you hear me?
So
Mm-hmm.
Mark, you're going
Yeah.
in and out. You said something about 15, five people. I missed it.
Like the five
You
people
said,
at the restaurant, and there are five people at the restaurant, but they're really got their friends, because they're all talking on their
Mark.
devices to other people. Can you hear me?
Oh, oh. But you know what? I'm gonna tell you something. My mom was like a phenomenal teacher, right? And you think
Right.
about it, I homeschooled my three kids. I had a daughter who began college at age 14, a son who read and took the book with him everywhere we went, Six Flags, wherever we went, he was always reading. And then I had another son who did manipulatives, like like he
Mhm.
took the bolts out of the garage door, so the garage collapsed
Right.
on us. So I had three kids going in three different directions that I had to keep engaged 24/7. So when I teach a class, I kind of can keep all your kinetic, your audio, your visual, all those learners together, because I had to for 13 years where it was just me. And if they didn't learn, then they weren't going to pass the EOGs and et cetera, et cetera. So
Right.
with that being said, I think that right now, because today's kids are so smart, they're so
Right.
knowledgeable, um, and they may be knowledgeable. So so when I was growing up, there was one way to cut a pie, right? Let's say,
Right.
you cut it this way, you cut it in half, you cut it in fours, you cut this. Now, kids, they might cut one eighth, 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 right? It's a different way of cutting the pie, but it still is the same exact thing. I
Right.
think sometimes teachers only know how to cut half, quarter, this and this. And so what happens is that the kids start to disengage because you're not teaching them the way that they learn, right?
Right.
So, in order to teach them the way that they learn, you have to listen to them. You have to engage them. You have to find the way that they learn and make sure that they are excited and engaged, right? And I think from what I've seen when I used to coach each class, I told you I substitute taught for 3.5 years because I wanted to find out what was going on in the school district, and I wanted to find out why they were saying kids couldn't learn, because I know that all kids can learn. What I
Right.
found was, once again, is that when you are not engaging these kids, it's kind of like the deer in the headlights, and they will sit there and they will yes you and they will mask, but they are not taking anything at all. So I think if there were, well, I know there is a way. I mean, my dad was a genius, so I always have to think of solution. You can't go to my dad with a problem. You can go to my dad with a problem without a solution, right? Anytime I talk to my dad about a problem, I also had to have a solution at the same time, right? And
Oh
that's
yeah.
what I told my kids. You come to me with a problem, you got to have a solution. So yeah, there is a way to address kids. There is a way to get kids engaged, etc. I mean, I'm talking about, like I said, from kids with learning disabilities to geniuses, and get them to learn together in the same exact environment. I think that we don't take enough time to do that because we have things ingrained in our head from the way that we learned how to teach. and how we learn to do things, and it becomes just a press play, a press play, a press play, a press play.
No, I can definitely see that. And I guess the other thing that goes on is that we get concerned about and that's what I was alluding to in that question earlier. We get distracted by the children's distraction tools and everything. So, like I said, they may be in a situation with their family, whether it's at a restaurant or in the house, kind of that open conversations you were talking about. But the kid has got his, PS5 or his Oculus set or something else that is distracting from the actual engagement. So maybe there are times that we have to make sure that they are engaged in the conversation the way that we want them to be engaged, but not say that we don't want them to have the technology devices, because those are important as well. But I'm just wondering your thoughts around that, because I think
And there's a way
sometimes,
to manage that too.
right, that's what I'm
Oh, there's
saying.
a way to manage that, because I dealt with kids, high school, middle school, who had technology and such, etc. And once again, like I said, it's a matter of going in, and what I did in one class, I might not be able to do in the next class, because once again, you have to understand the individuals that are in that classroom. So it doesn't mean that how can I put it? How can I put it? I don't lessen or dilute the lesson that needs to be learned. I alter the process to make sure that I have the most inclusive audience. And out of my 3 years of substitute teaching, and in order for a child in order for them to be marked present in my class, they had to hand in their classwork, right? I would tell them I wasn't taking attendance. I took attendance, of course, but in order for me to say that they were present, they had to hand in a paper at the end of the day, right? Out of those
Yep.
3 years that I substitute taught, only two did not hand in their paperwork. And one, because they told me that I reminded the kid too much of his parent. And believe it or not, I saw him this year in the mall, and he thanked me.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah,
I
that's
wouldn't remember
important.
him, right? Because I taught him in 8th grade. But
Right.
I saw him this year in the mall, in the Crabtree Mall, and he thanked me for being his teacher. And then the second
Wow.
one was a young lady. And what I was trying to explain to her is, I said, she was saying her classmates got to wear the short shorts. And I said, well, honey, you are not built like those classmates. You have a little bit extra in your caboose. So
Hmm.
because if you wear those short shorts, teachers can't concentrate, right? And so she was like flirting with the football players and stuff in the short shorts. And I told her she had to sit down. So she said, well, if I have to sit down, I'm not going to get any classwork. I said, well, that's okay. I said, because you're one, and I got 4 football players back there, and I need them to pay attention to handing the classwork. So those are only 2 people who gave me a challenge out of my 3 years. And I'm talking about, I had kids who threw chairs. I had kids who did all kinds of stuff. And teachers could not believe that those kids did work for me.
Wow. That's
Kids
amazing.
know if you care. That's the bottom
Oh
line.
no. Yeah, they
They know
definitely
if you
know.
care, and
Yep.
they know if you're
My brother.
comfortable with them.
Yep. My brother's done work with at-risk youth, and I think part of the reason that they work and vibe with him is because he's able to relate to them and able to have conversations with them on a personal level, and actually be able to reach them where they are and definitely understand some of their conversation. They're able to talk about movies and even music and some other stuff that folks may not be able to relate to as much. But like you said, that having that relatability is very important, and I think that's why Malik is successful in what he does with helping reach some of those at-risk youth and getting them off of those bad paths that they might be going on. And he's been doing that
But
for
let me
a
tell you the
number of
wildest
years.
thing. Let me tell you the wildest thing, Mark. I grew up in Parsippany, New Jersey, right? And I always tell you, Parsippany High, we had 1,600 students, and I'm sorry, we had 1,700 students. Only 16 were African American, right? So basically, it's hot. So basically, I grew up around a lot of white people, right? Majority white people. So when I was a sophomore in college, my mother said, I don't want you to think that you're better than anybody else. I want to make sure that you're, teaching in New York and you're working in Parsippany. And so I had to, and my mother did not believe in code switching. So the Black person that I was around all my white friends, I had to be the same exact Black person when I went to Newark. So when I got to Newark, New Jersey, I remember I was teaching at Sussex Avenue School, right? That was the first time I taught without my mom, and I didn't know anybody in the school. So my mom had taught in Newark forever. They knew her. She won history programs. So pretty much every school I went to, my mom knew the principal, so I had somebody to look out for me. So I went to Sussex Avenue School, and they said Sussex Avenue School was like the worst school, it was the roughest, the kids were bad and all this other kind of stuff. But I was like, that's why I got a teacher's assignment. It doesn't make a difference. So I went in there, and the first teacher I met was Caucasian, right? And she's like, "Oh my God, you got your purse and you got jewelry on." She's like, "They're gonna steal your purse. They're gonna steal your jewelry. You know, I wear no pocketbook. I put everything in my pants." So I'm like freaking out. I'm like, "Oh my God, what's about to happen in this class?" I go in the first classroom, right? And the student's name was Danny. It was Danny and Mike, and I don't remember everybody else in the class, but I just remember Danny and Mike, right? So Mike was the football player, the popular guy in the class. You know, all the girls used to like Mike. Mike was cool, you know. He's like, "Miss Jones, you want a younger man?" I said, "No, baby, I'm fine." I'm fine. But Mike was the cool kid, right? And Danny was the tough girl. So Danny walked in like, "Yo." I was like, "Okay." So when we're in the class, there's like different warm up games and stuff. Like I said, I have to size up the class to see where the class is. So I was laughing and joking with Danny because Danny was putting a safety, well, not laughing and joking, but Danny put a safety pin through her arm and blood was coming out. And I was like, "Danny, please." I said, "I don't like blood. Please don't do that. Don't do that. Do that." I said, "You're going to
Right.
make Miss Jones go crazy in this class, right?" They were like, "Miss Jones, don't keep picking on Danny because Danny has a gun in her locker." I said, "Danny," I said, you got a gun in your locker?" And she was like, "Yeah." I said, "Why do you have a gun in your locker?" She said, "For protection." I said, "Let me ask you something." I said, "I'm gonna ask every kid in this class, is anybody in this class afraid of Danny?" And they were like, I mean, is anybody in this class not afraid of Danny? And they were like, "No, Miss Jones, everybody's afraid of Danny." I said, "Danny," I said, "get that gun out your locker." I said, "I don't care what happens." I said, "Everybody in this classroom's afraid of you. So you don't have anything to worry about in school." I said, "I don't want to hear nothing else about that gun." Now, I don't know if Danny did or did not take the gun out of her locker, but the thing is, I was able to, when I would come back to school, Danny would hug me. "Miss Jones, oh my God, I'm so happy you're here." You know, Mike would laugh and joke with me. "Oh my God, Miss Jones, da, 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 da." Because I gave each one attention. I addressed each one. Danny came back and later on told me some personal things as to why not as to why she carried a gun, but as to some of her personal insecurities that were going on
Right.
in life. And so I say that to say people know when you care, people know when you're judging them. Danny knew that I wasn't judging her. I was like, "Danny, look, we all afraid. You don't have to worry about nothing with us." But Danny knew that I wasn't judging her. I never called her a bad kid. I never called her anything like that. So God has enabled me to work with all different kids. I had, you know, at my church, I had four girls who, you know, one was actually went to a school for juvenile delinquents. Another one, and the other three were just bullies. They used to beat up people, steal their clothes, steal their shoes, steal their lunch money, everything else. And those four girls, the people in the church who were from the hood like them, kicked them out, locked them out the church. And I said, "Wait a minute." I was a deaconess at that church. I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "Ain't nobody kicking nobody out this church." I said, "Those four girls are coming back in and they're going to be my responsibility." I said, "And listen, you ministers, you don't know how to talk to them. So you can't talk to them. I will talk to them." And I said, "You all," I said, "keep your mouth quiet because you don't know how to talk to adults. So you talk to me and I will talk to the adults for you." Now, I was not a minister. I was not one of those kids from the hood that did the things that they did and got away with it, cursing out teaching stuff like that. But because I cared,
Right.
I was able to relate to both. So I don't think you have
No.
to be in that experience. I don't think everybody with an aneurysm I don't think somebody has to have an aneurysm or survive an aneurysm to be able to talk to me.
No, and I agree. And like I said, I don't think Malik necessarily was a. I mean, he might have had some run-ins here and there in terms of certain things, but definitely not a bad kid. Definitely wasn't in any gangs. My brother and everything. So I agree that you don't have to have those lifestyles, but he was able to relate to them just as the way you're talking about. You were relating to your folks and everything. Of course, if I was talking to Danny, I would have a question that you may not have thought of, but it might have been the journalist in me and everything along those lines, because there's the old notion of the hip hop artist that talks the junk about the gangster life and everything, but then if you throw them in Compton, they really can't survive in Compton or in any of the other environments, but they just are good at talking that talk and everything, and it sounds good on the record. So the question that I probably would be asking Danny from a safety perception and everything is, she told you that she had a gun and everything, and I don't know where the locker was, but I don't know that if it was a safety tool, what exactly good it was going to be doing in the locker. Because that's the other thing, is it's not even on her person and all in that space. And like I said, the locker might have been a mile down somewhere on the campus and all in that space. And that would probably just be the journalist and me going like, well, you got a gun, but you don't really have a gun because the gun is way down there. So if somebody else has got something more directly on their person, that gun being locked up is not going to do you any good. But that just being the journalist kind of questions that I ask.
But you know what? I'll tell you something. I don't think the gun was for Danny and I to talk about like that. Do you know what I mean? I
Right.
think that the acknowledgement that she had a gun, um, and I did not judge her.
No,
Do you
not
know
at
what I
all.
mean? I didn't send her down to the office. I didn't try to get her expelled. I didn't try to do all those other things that people do. I mean, this was
Right.
years and years and years ago, and I don't know what I would do today in that situation. So I'm not saying anything, but I'm just saying back in that day, and there were no school shootings or anything like that. I never made Danny feel uncomfortable. I never judged her. That happened to be a substitute assignment that I was on for like a week and a half. I mean,
Right.
after that particular class, Sussex Avenue School called me back every single day. So whether I had eighth grade, second grade, whatever, I always had a class at Sussex Avenue. Actually, sophomore, junior, and senior year of college. And so Danny would actually come to my classroom and she'd be like, "All right, Miss Jones, everything okay?" Because she knew fourth and fifth grade was my challenge. They just talked
Right.
too much. That was a rough one. So if I had fourth and fifth grade, she would come and say, "Miss Jones, you okay today?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Does everybody know Danny?" And they'd be like, "Yeah." And Danny said, "Let me know if somebody acts up." I said, "You guys hear that? So if anybody acts up, you get to go see Danny." Look, my kids were like, my kids would do all the work, do everything that needed to be done. But once again, like I said, with Danny and the gun, that was not. And like I said, this was 20 years ago. I just graduated from college. Kids saw me as being young and et cetera, et cetera. But I have had an opportunity to work in different environments. I have had an opportunity to be around different kids. And some people may not make me feel as comfortable. Like I said, the young girl that was Latino that had on the short shorts that was doing that in front of the boys, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable because you have to be careful telling a woman about her body, and I'm a foreign teacher. Like I'm not there every day. So me telling her about what to do with her body and not to wear those clothes and not to bend over and stuff like that, I did feel uncomfortable. That
Right.
made me feel very uncomfortable.
That makes
But
sense. That makes a lot of sense. I was going to bring, you brought up some interesting statistics about grades in a certain part of the country. And I know that I have worked in the grading industry and know that sometimes it can be interesting what happens in that space and everything. But before I get to those statistics with a lovely shared screen, I was going to bring that video that I was referring to with you and the school teacher or the special
yeah,
ed
let's
teacher.
do it.
So I'm going to play that right now.
Hey, Denise, I just wanted to say thank you so much for telling me a little bit about you and education and all the things that are going on. I'm so proud. Thank you for your service as a teacher.
Well, thank you. Our teacher assistant, the same thing.
Hey,
almost.
look, you were up there, you were with our kids, and
Yes.
they need that type of support.
They do.
They just released a report on The Guardian, and there's also something out there that's been new legislation with PANDAS talking about how kids who have experienced chickenpox, the flu, strep throat, simple everyday diseases that we consider that have not gotten completely out of their system
Yes.
are now experiencing what we would call adverse social behaviors.
Okay.
And so sometimes instead of being told that they have, that autoimmune deficiency, they're being given a label of psychosis. It's a new article in The Guardian.
Yes.
Tell me, what are your thoughts about it? Do you think all the kids needed to be on medication? What did you see about the medication? What do you think some of that could have been done through therapy, talk? What are your thoughts?
I feel like the medication is not for the children. You just have to take that time and sit with them and go through things with them and explain to them that they don't need this. They need us as educators to help them.
And that's a little bit more difficult because right now, Gen Alpha, everything, everybody from 2010, they believe in getting on the computer, doing everything automated. They don't really believe in that relational thing because that has not really been a part of their learning. Like they've learned a lot of things on iPads, etc.
Yes. We need to get them back. They need to be in the classroom learning like we did when we were coming up. They don't need all this medication or none of that like that. That stuff that medication just makes them worse than they were before. So they don't need it. They need to take it away from them and educate the teachers on how to work with these students like this. That's
Communication
what they need
style,
to do.
soft skills,
Yes.
just relationships. Because sometimes, do you think that maybe some of the kids are acting out because they're frustrated? Like they've
A
been
lot
trying
of
to
the
talk
times.
and people have
A
not heard
lot
them?
of the times. And you have a lot of shy children that want to say something, but they're afraid. So we need to work on that also.
Wow.
You know, as I was growing up, I was a shy child. And I'm
No, you aren't.
And,
No.
and I'm still a little shy.
You lost that somewhere.
In the church, when I go to church, I want to say things, but it's like almost like I have it in my mind, but when I get in front of people, I just lose it, you know? So I'm just working on that again. But everything's going to turn out right because I got God.
Well, I'm going to say you are phenomenal, and I just want to say thank you once again for being a great teacher.
You are so welcome, and I love it. And
Love
I'm
it.
still doing it. Even as a retiree, I still involve the children.
Love it. Thank you.
That's the video I was just referring to, and she definitely gave some great energy and great stuff, and you had a great conversation with her. But that was the video that I was referring to.
Yeah, awesome. And can you hear the passion? Can you hear the
Yes.
time commitment? Can you hear the trust between she and the students? That's what I mean. So when that's there, kids will perform. I was able to teach kids science. Science is not my favorite subject. Math is my favorite subject, but I was able to teach kids science better than their teachers were able to, because they knew that when we were working through whatever the problem was or whatever the answer was, I was not judging them. I didn't give them a specific way to do it. I allowed them to use their strengths. And as they're using their strengths, say, well, you know what? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? What way do you want to go next? What do you want to do next? Kind of coaching them instead of dictating to them. And therefore, kids are less defensive. We have to remember that, when I was in school, my parents compared me to like what was going on with my neighbors, what the other students in my classroom were doing, etc. in New Jersey. And then also we would get stories about my family in North Carolina. So they would be like, this person's doing this. What about this? This person's doing this. What about this? And it's really funny because my cousin Michelle, she and I, we started piano at the same time. We started running at the same time. We started something else. It was like 3 different things, but we started them all at the same exact time. And I never talked to Michelle. I didn't know anything about what she was doing until she moved into the house. But our parents would tell us that, my mom would tell me later on that, I want you to look into the piano. So I would look into the piano. I didn't know why I was looking into it, but I looked into playing the piano. I played the piano at the same time Michelle was playing. So I say all that to say that, I've got the family, I've got my house, and I've got my extended family, right? Today, kids are looking on the internet and they're comparing themselves to people around the world. So the resources that my counterparts have may not be the same resources that I have. So if I'm looking in my closet and I'm trying to find something to wear, and I'm comparing myself to Kim Kardashian, I'm not going to have the same thing. She might have on red and I might have on red, but that might be the extent of it. But sometimes for kids, because they don't have that comparison, because we don't have that sit down and talk and say, this is our culture, right? This is our culture. This is what we do. This is what our family does. Because they don't sit down and have that kind of culture. They're out there grasping for culture, grasping for where they fit in. And what they see is what's on social media.
No, they definitely see a lot on social media.
When they're looking at all this, stuff externally, there's not like that down home feeling. So now when you have a teacher's aide who gives you that down home feeling, like I'm listening to you, your outfit looks nice, you did a great job on that project, let's do this together. Oh, what are you eating for lunch? Potato chips. Do you like potato chips? Are those your favorite potato chips? That's the only time they get it. I had kids who told me that they failed because they wanted to stay with the same teacher. Nobody else listened to them. So because nobody else listened to them, they wanted to fail, stay in the same exact grade so they could be with the teacher.
Well, speaking of failure, one of the other things that you had brought up to my attention was a part of the country. Actually, I think it's Decatur and all of that. And I know that I have definitely worked in the testing field, assessment and all of that. And apparently they are not having the best scores in the world and all in that space. So I definitely wanted you to share a little bit about these figures that you had also brought to my attention as well, because apparently they are definitely not doing well on the grade level requirements. And that's actually something that I work in that measurement, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about these figures. And there were a couple of them, a couple of the slides that you sent, and all in that space, including them being far below the state averages of that particular state, and all in that way. But if you want to share a little bit about these statistics as well, I'm sure folks that are listening would be interested, as that was something that you also brought to my attention.
You know what the concern is? Think about this. What's one thing that we talked about previously? Right now, they are euthanizing homeless people with mental challenges.
Right.
If a child is not able to perform at grade level, it could be assumed that they have a mental challenge or a mental deficit, and that's why they can't catch up.
Right.
Some of these kids are going to have a very, very hard time getting a job.
Yeah.
Some of these kids are going to have a very, very hard time finding housing. GOP is looking at eliminating Social Security, right? So a lot of the benefits that we're getting, subsidized housing and that kind of stuff, who knows what's going to happen with that? I'm not going to forecast anything because, if Democrats get out and vote, well, things will be changed. But if we don't get out and vote, who knows what's going to happen? This is sad because those 1% and 2%, those are African Americans that are not reaching. Those are 1% and 2% passing the EOG scores. So when you think about that, you think about the homelessness, you think about euthanasia, who's going to be impacted?
Yeah, we'll definitely be impacted and everything. There's another thing, getting off of that, but still I hear that passion in your voice. But there is a friend, I would say, of both of ours. He's a friend of my family, and I know that it's somebody that you have a great deal of respect for as well, that talks about the notion, and you mentioned the churches earlier, of our church leadership and what they don't talk about. So I actually had the pleasure of hearing him speak at an event that Bernie Sanders was supposed to be at, but he wound up doing it virtually, even though the other two cities he did in person with Bernie, and that was over at Hayti, and that was Reverend Barber. But I know Reverend Barber oftentimes talks about the notion that our churches don't even give lip service to the notion of poverty and helping those that are in poverty kind of situations, because even though that is a vital part of the Bible, I think there was a study of the amount of sermons that touch on that topic, and it was dismal, the amount of sermons around the country that actually address the notion of poverty and poverty being a concern and all in that space. But as a lobbyist and as one that definitely works with the Democratic Party, I just wanted your thoughts about that, because when he gave me those statistics, and I don't remember the exact figures, it was definitely disappointing, to say the least. And it wasn't just the evangelical churches that oftentimes can be Christian right, but it was even some of our own churches that weren't addressing that issue in their sermons. Because like I said, I think they studied sermons across denominations, across even maybe religions and everything, and it was barely touched on, if at all.
I think it's twofold, right? I think one, I think that the message needs some massaging, in the sense that, what does the Bible talk about giving? Time, talent, and treasure.
Right.
There are people who are giving an abundance of time that may not be valued because a pulpit maybe, or a pastor may be looking for dollars.
Right.
Well, if I don't have the revenue, if I don't have the finances to continuously donate to every single thing that's out there, but I do have the time because I'm unemployed, that also needs to be honored and cherished. So my church in New Jersey, I'll give you an example. My church in New Jersey, my pastor, Pastor Carter, look, if you baked a cake, he was talking about the cake like in church in the next morning, right? So it wasn't that these people needed acknowledgement for baking the cake, but he was a young pastor. He came, I think he started our church, which was like at age 27, we had 2,000 members. So, people were very skeptical because the person before him was like in his 60s. So this young pastor comes in, young wife, I don't know, but those older people in the church, I'm telling you, if somebody made meatloaf, he would talk about meatloaf during the sermon, about how that was the best sermon. You could see the open, get it. Then they make meatloaf for everybody. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And then there were some people who were very, very well off, right? One of the persons I went to church with, he had a 6-car garage, a car in every bay, and a golf course in his backyard. His daughter was someone that I mentored. That's why she went to UNC Chapel Hill. But the bottom line is, the person who gave a lot to the church financially, right? They were still acknowledged, but in different ways. It wasn't that somebody stood up and said that, this person gave the church, $40,000 today. It was that we can, pay for everybody's school books. We can do summer school this year because someone came in and gave, you know, we asked, we had a need, and somebody came in and filled the entire need.
Is
So I
that a
think that, one, with the messaging, I think that we have to honor time, we have to honor talents, and we have to honor treasure so that we don't exclude members, right?
right?
And then number two is, and that's not to say everybody who gives like, $5 check, you need to come up and acknowledge them and that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying, when people go above and beyond, and even that $5 check, they may have only had $1 and they gave $5. But I'm just saying, not that you have to acknowledge every single person in the check in the church, but you do need to make people feel special, right? That's number one. And then number two is, when you're talking about people not acknowledging people in poverty, there's a couple types of impoverishment, and it depends on your ministry, right? So there are people who are mentally impoverished, and there are people who are financially impoverished.
Right.
And there could be people who are, physical challenges, etc. But, we have different ministries that we need to pursue. So if a pastor is going to espouse taking care of the poor or taking care of the less fortunate, I was always taught that the church is a hospital with many, many patients. Then we need to make sure it's like a hospital with people coming, emergency room, et cetera, sometimes emergency room, coming and check in for, surgery overnight, whatever. It's in that sense that people go to the church in need, right?
Yeah. At what point, as you were just, Kelly, as you were talking, one of the things occurred to me that I was just wondering about. At what point do we differentiate between, say, mental health and eccentricity? Because I do know some folks folks may see them, as I have said on a couple of shows, I get around quite a bit by mass transit and all in that space, meaning get around by the bus. And there is a young lady, I think originally from New York. I mean, dresses very flashy, definitely has a eccentric personality. And there are some folks that may say that she has a mental illness, and I don't know that it's necessarily a mental illness. She's just highly eccentric and all in that space. So at what point do we differentiate, and should we differentiate? Because some people may see that eccentric person and automatically think that they are crazy, and they may just have some eccentric ways about them.
You know what the funniest thing is, when I was growing up, I grew up in New Jersey, visited my grandma in the South. And when I came here to North Carolina, I was always told that I was a bad kid. I was bad because I talked too much. I was too hyper. I was just bad. But I would go back home to New Jersey, and they would tell me, that I was good. I won most talkative in high school. I won awards and, all kinds of stuff. I think that it's contextual. So in the North, what happens is people are busy. They don't have time to get into your business. It's okay. Can you do this? We got to do this because we're going to work hard Monday through Friday. Friday at noon, we get off to go do whatever we want to do, right? In the South, it's very family oriented. It's very traditional. It's more of a cliquish type thing, because I've got this family, I've got this generation, this generation, this generation. So what happens is, in the South, if they don't know who you are, what they're going to do is they're going to take the bits and pieces they have, and they're going to fill in everything else with their family perspective. So because their family perspective may not be what you experienced elsewhere, 9 times out of 10, they're going to get it wrong. And that's where, you have to be careful with, my mom would always tell me, don't assume, right?
Right.
Don't prejudge, because you don't know about another person. So what you have to do is you have to sit down and talk.
Right.
You have to sit down and talk. Or if that person's not willing to talk to you, it's just none of your business. None of your business. Get out, move on, because you already got a family and a clique that's doing things the way that you do them. But because somebody comes in that's new and different, you don't know all the pieces to their puzzle.
Right.
You only know, we only know what people present and what we take the time to learn. And as I talk about in my book, there's something called confirmation bias, and that's basically if I believe. Now, when I was in school, when I was in college, people said, I don't know if I told you, my freshman year, my roommate put a rebel flag up on the wall, and she was talking about how Yankees and that kind of stuff, and I didn't even know what a rebel flag was and all that stuff. So the bottom line, well, so I'll put it this way: when she put up the rebel flag, this is a great example. When she put up the rebel flag, my colleagues, my African American colleagues, they were pissed. They were like, "You want me to
Right.
fight her? You want me to take care of it?" And I was like, "No." You know what I did? I went to Davis Library, which is a graduate library on our campus, and I read about the Ku
Mhm.
Klux Klan because I wanted to find out why there was so much hate and so much, confusion about, you know, rooming with an African American. And it was very enlightening to me. And to this day, some of the things I used from that I learned from that Ku Klux Klan book, I'm able to apply today. And sometimes when I get into, situations, heated situations, which could be racially biased, I'm able to go back and reflect upon what I read on to say, hey, look, you know what? There is, when you have, look at God, he's showing up. When you have this type of exposure, when this is your world right here, right? And you have something out here to enter in, you're going to have difficulty with it because this goes against everything that you grew up believing. So if you
Right.
grew up believing that Black people were bad, if you grew up believing that Black people are going to harm you, and you meet this young lady out here and she's Black, the first thing you're going to think is, okay, when's she going to harm me? Right? You're not going to think that she's a nice person that could be helping me.
Right.
You're going to think, how long is it going to take for her to harm me? And even if she's being nice, she's only being nice so she can get closer to me to eventually harm me. So I had to combat that Black thing and had to combat that Yankee thing like 24/7. Like I would tell people I was from New Jersey. They say, "Oh, do you know such and such from New York?" I was like, "New York and New Jersey, they're kind of two different states." So I mean, but once again, everything was, "Oh yeah, because you're a Yankee and you think that way, and you're a Yankee and you think this way." And I was just like, "Am I like in antebellum South or what?" But then once again, my dad taught me you don't prejudge. You sit down and you talk. So
That
what have you
makes sense.
heard about? What
Yeah,
have you
you
heard about?
definitely got to. Yeah, you definitely have to do that. You can't prejudge and everything along those lines. But in that same space, and it was something I was going to bring up earlier, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Do you think that we sometimes prejudge what we think people are doing as well? Because I know I've been guilty of it on occasions, but we assume that the athletes, because they're getting paid lucrative amounts of money, are not doing the things into the community and that they're not giving back. And I definitely think that if you came up from the ranks, that you need to give back in one sense or another, but we oftentimes don't know what they are doing. So they may be giving back more than we think they are giving. Now, there are some like Michael Jordan that I think could possibly be doing more to give back, but that's just my own personal opinion. But there are definitely some folks like LeBron and others that we know what they're giving back, but we don't always know what they're giving back. And for all I know, Michael may be giving money to North Carolina Central or some of the other spaces, and I don't know that. And maybe the folks there at Central know that. But do you think that we sometimes put too much pressure on our athletes and our entertainers to give back if they came up from the grassroots, for lack of a better term?
But do you know what the Bible says? Never let your right hand know what your left hand's doing.
Gotcha.
Or left hand, right hand. I may have mixed it up. But the bottom line is when you give, you're supposed to give from your heart. You're not supposed to give for man's recognition. Once again, like, and it's tough because I'm from New Jersey. New Jersey is none your business. None your business.
Right.
So we don't prejudge other people. We don't have expectations of other people because what they're doing is none of our business. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that
Everybody
makes
has
a
their
lot of
own life, and you can choose to support or not support, and that's okay. But I can't judge you for what you're doing because I don't know all the pieces to the puzzle.
right.
I only know that Mark is a cool guy. He's got a great voice. He's got a podcast. He's always nice to me. Anything else
Right.
you ask me about Mark, I can't tell you. I can't tell you should give. I can't tell you should live over here. I can't tell you anything else about you because I don't know you. And
Right.
so I think that because we don't know people, we take bits and pieces, we take snapshots We take snapshots. One of the things we take snapshots of people and try to make a picture. One of the things that I found very interesting is uh, one of my colleagues committed suicide, but I've worked with at least 5 people that have attempted. And as a deaconess, I work with 3. And one of the things I find very interesting is people say, I never knew, that they were suicidal. And for every single last one, I'm like, I knew that they were suicidal. And the reason being is because I develop a relationship with people so that they can be transparent with me.
Yeah.
And I think if we take that time, I mean, you can't develop a relationship with everybody because then you won't take care of yourself. Self-care is very important. And I don't know if you read my book, but my journey has been that I never learned how to take care of myself. I've given, give everything away, give everything away, because that's what my parents taught me, to give. But when my parents were teaching me to give, my parents were married. So my mom would give, but my dad would give to my mom. Do you know what I mean? And my dad would be like, no, Shelby, you can't do it. You can't give anymore. We're at the end. For Christmas, my mom would buy perfume for all the moms and buy gifts for the kids. Now, what other teachers were, because my mom said, you know what, these are single parents and they're probably not going to get gifts if I don't buy them a gift. So my mom would buy perfume, expensive perfume for the moms, the single moms in her classroom.
Wow.
Single mothers in her classroom.
I know what you mean.
So my dad gave to my mom. So it was okay for my mom to give because she had someone who was there who was kind of like guiding and navigating things along the way. I was never taught to care for self. I was always taught to care for everybody else. Care for my daughter, care for my sons, care for my ex-husband, whatever you got, give it away. That's the Christian thing. Give it away. Give it away. You got to keep giving. And what I realized was, as I kept giving, the people who needed me the most on the emotional level, I couldn't be there for them.
No.
I couldn't be there for them. Maslow's hierarchy. If you're not taking care of yourself, then you start to worry about yourself, right? After you've given everything away, you start to worry about yourself and you can't be there emotionally for other people. So it was a tough lesson, but I had to learn, you know what? I got to start looking in the mirror and taking care of me. Just little things, just little things to take care of me. And I think that, once again, like I said, I think that when we prejudge people on what they're giving or doing or etc., we don't know to what extent they're giving.
Yeah, true.
It's like the woman with the pennyworth in the Bible. She gave her all. There are people throwing in thousands and whatever because they had thousands. Do you know what I mean? She didn't have thousands, but she gave her all. The woman with the alabaster oil, right? It wasn't money that she gave Jesus. She didn't give him money,
right?
But she still gave to him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely see that thoughts and everything, and definitely got to think about the intentions of why people are given and how they are given, and a lot of times they're given more than we are expecting them to give and everything. But you said something else that was really resonating with me and everything, which is that you oftentimes had a sense of people that were not in the best of the mental health environment from your conversation with them. And I know that too often when we've had, and you alluded to it earlier, those school shootings, there have been folks in the family that said that they had no idea that the person was on the edge or that the things were going on in that space. And then the flip side of that is we've also had incidences where they were concerned about the person's mental health, and when they reached out to the positions of power, they were basically told that they couldn't do anything about it until the person did something, meaning they couldn't act in a kind of intervention kind of a way and everything unless the person actually committed a crime. And then in at least one case, and maybe 2 cases that I'm aware of, the person committed the crime and they were very heinous crimes and all in that space. So what can we do in those senses? Because it seems to me that we've got to do a better job of, one, listening to people and making sure that when people are reaching out and giving pleas of help, that we actually listen and understand what they are saying. And if there are folks that are hearing those concerns, because I think it was one of the incidences. It was a young lady that tried to go to the police before the gentleman killed the folks that he killed, and all in that space, and they were basically told that by the police in that area, and I can't remember whether it was the one in Tennessee or one of the other ones, that they couldn't do anything because the person had not done anything, even though they were concerned about that person's mental health.
So I can tell you that one, we need to talk and we need to listen and we need to stop judging, right? Because I think the reason why people are not speaking up. So if in my book I write about it, I grew up an only child, and my parents made me talk about everything. And so because I talk about everything, I don't talk about everything because it's a problem. I talk about everything. Well, I talk about everything to say, hey, look, this is it. Let it go. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
This is it. Let it go. There are some people who cannot talk about it to say, this is it. Let it go. There are some people who talk about it to say, this is it. I need your help to create a pathway forward, right? If you are not in that position to help them move forward, there are a couple things that you can do. One, you can pray for them. That's always, that's always an answer. But two, you can offer to get on the 988 call with them and suicide hotline. You can offer to get on the domestic violence hotline with them and make a call. You can offer to get on whatever anonymous hotline there is and make that call with them if they need direction, right? But you gotta first understand what is it that they want. And that's what it was sometimes with my students, is that once again, I think the reason why people felt comfortable talking to me is because if you're talking to me to get it off your chest, I'm not gonna keep bringing it up the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day, right? You just needed to get it off your chest. So I think we need to understand that. The other thing is, I think we need to listen more intently. Have you ever listened to the YouTube with Aaron Stark?
No, I've heard that one.
So I'll send it to you. He was on CNN. And, I'm always just trying to understand different aspects of it, because what I don't ever want to do is go into a situation with one mindset and try to push someone into that mindset. Right. Mm-hmm. So I watched the video with Aaron Stark, and it was really interesting because he was a would-be mall shooter or something like that. He would have done a mass shooting. And what he was saying is that he was, hold on one second. He suffered some abuse as a child. And what happened was they forced him to reconcile with his abuser. Like, he didn't want to be around the abuser, but they forced him to reconcile with his abuser. And he went to a mall and he was going to shoot people at the mall. He didn't care who the people were, but he was going to shoot people to get back at his parents, because he was mad at his parents for forcing him to be with the abuser or whatever it was. And I listened to a second interview by him, and what he said was he went to the school like 3 different times and told them he had a problem. And each time he went to tell them he had a problem, like he called and something happened, and the next time he just showed up and something happened, the third time, nobody listened to him. And because nobody listened to him, that's what aggravated him. I know. He was doing this because they were talking about gun violence. And the reason why he did not commit the crime that he wanted to commit is because he didn't have the money to purchase the gun.
Wow.
But the point is, I think if we're going to help people with mental health challenges, is that we have to listen. And if we're not able to listen, ask, who do they feel comfortable with bringing on? I worked at a hotel in DC, in Baltimore. And there was a young lady who was going through a domestic violence situation, and she did not know how to get help. And so what I did was I got on the phone with her to, one of the domestic hotlines. And as soon as she got on, I got off. Now, I didn't need to hear the whole situation because not my business. But I did hear that there was a challenge and there was a pain and there was some fear at home. And so I told her, I said, look, I said, I don't know how I can help you. I don't have a, you know, I'm staying at my daughter's. I don't have a house here. I don't have any of this. I said, would you be interested in calling the 1-800 hotline? And she said yes. So once again, listening and not prejudging, especially if you don't know. Like if I don't know about her situation and I don't know about her husband, how dare I try to put my thoughts and my past experience in her box? How dare I?
Well, that's what I meant by that lady that is definitely has some eccentric qualities and everything, but there were some people that may put her in that, mental health box and everything. But best I can tell, she's, well grounded and definitely doesn't have the issues, best as I can tell, and definitely seems to be a functioning human being. But there are some that would make that stereotype, and I try not to do that, even though we slip into the stereotypes whether we want to or not. I know we're going to wind down shortly. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as I always do
Mark,
with
I
you,
just
Kelly, and Avery. But one of the other
Mark,
things I was curious about,
I just want to throw in just one thing really quick. Just one thing.
yeah,
A lot of times people, what I found when I talk to my students, a lot of times people who would encourage them to try and go see a psychiatrist or had mental health diagnosis. So, you can't go to a crazy person. You can't go to a crazy person and ask for advice because a crazy person is going to tell you to go to, a psychiatrist. And I'm saying that loosely. I mean,
right,
just jokingly. But if someone has a mental health issue, they don't want to be alone. I don't
right,
want to be the only one going to go see a psychiatrist. So since I'm going to see a psychiatrist, the first thing I'm going to do is say, well, you know what? I think you should go see a psychiatrist too.
mhm.
Because that's an area that I feel comfortable in. Do you know what I mean?
No, I
And
definitely know
you
what you mean.
and sometimes I say this, and I wrote this in my book too. I'm giving away everything from the book. But if someone's world is this size, right? And your world is this size, right? Trying to get in the screen, in this size.
Right,
If you go to somebody whose world is this size with regards to baseball, right? You're a professional baseball player. And you go to somebody whose world is this size as far as knowledge, reading about baseball, understanding baseball, etc. And you ask them about baseball, they may not give you the best advice because they have not studied baseball. And this doesn't mean, this could be a dad, who reads the encyclopedia instead of watching baseball. He doesn't know anything about baseball. But sometimes what happens is when we're trying to do something that's this big, when we have a vision or a project or something that's this big, we go to people with worlds this big, and they're going to tell us we can't do it. We're not good
yeah,
enough. You need to get mental help if you think you can do that. I've never seen that done before.
yeah,
You
it's
have to be
definitely. I see what-
careful. Be careful who you go to. And if you go to them once, was it fool me once, shame on me? No, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. If you go to
Right,
them once, that's good. Because now you know what they can or cannot handle. And you now know that their world may be smaller than your world. So on different areas, in different
mhm,
areas. So you might go to so you might be a professional baseball player, but you might be going to somebody who's a scientist. So
right,
you might not want to go to a scientist to find out about baseball. But if you have a science project, then their world is like this and your world is like this. So you want to go to them for the science project. Does that make any
right.
sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. But the other thing that's been happening, and like I said, we got just a few more minutes to go and all in that space. But a lot of times we start paying attention to people's cognitive abilities when we think that it will be an impact on their job and their ability to do their job. Because even as you, as a political consultant, know, we've got two candidates that are up there in age and they do have different things that are going on with their mental health, and I think both sides are playing to the mental health aspects in order to say why we don't need Biden or Trump in office and all in that space, because there's always this conversations around the cognitive abilities of our leaders. And it's not the first time. Biden and Trump are not the first ones to go through this. I think there was even questions around Reagan and questions around a number of other leaders that have been there, maybe even Clinton and Carter and some other ones as well. But how important is it for us to think about the mental health of the leadership, or is it a red herring that some people are throwing out there in terms of their campaigns and all in that space? Because we've been hearing a lot around mental health, particularly the mental health of our leaders. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as you are a political consultant among the various things that you do, including being a teacher.
Well, I will say this: one of the richest men out there is Elon Musk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people question his mental health.
Right.
One of the prominent leaders out there was Steve Jobs, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it was either Steve Jobs or the other one. One of them was supposedly on the spectrum. Oh, and Musk is on the spectrum.
Right.
I don't. I don't. The thing that we have to realize is when we put someone in leadership, the question is, what is their support team like? Because the leadership
Right.
is the figurehead. One of the things you always learn in politics is the leadership is the voice, and it's the people behind the scene that make the difference. A lot of people, when I went to UNC, they said, yeah, Dean Smith was the figurehead, but it's the coaches underneath that really, work with players on certain aspects of the game. So the question is, it's not so much the leader, right? It is the leader, but it's also, what does the supporting team look like? Who are the people that they're surrounding themselves with? And are the people they're surrounding themselves with, like the other political leaders, etc., are they stale and stagnant, or are they progressive?
Right.
We're talking about Pandas. I'll just tell you this really quick. We're talking about Pandas. Pandas has been around since 1986.
Mm-hmm.
This is 2023. There are people here in North Carolina that did not learn about Pandas until this year.
Wow.
So it's been around for 40 years. But there are health professionals that did not know about it. So what you want is a leader who's able to go out and find different tentacles for growth. When I used to open hotels for a living and sales and marketing stuff, it wasn't so much about opening that hotel or just getting people in heads in the beds for that day. It's about, what is my pipeline to make sure that we are continuously moving forward, that we're staying ahead of the trends, that if there is a new business model, business place model, that we're the first one to come to market with it. Who's reading the newspaper in Europe and watching CNN and all the other kind of stuff. Bet you a lot of people didn't know about Denmark and euthanasia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. And I was actually on the news show earlier today, and we were talking about the student loan forgiveness, and somebody had brought up the Pell Grants. And I remember that I had a Pell Grant when I went to school in the 80s and everything. And when I looked it up, I saw that it's actually been around for roughly 60 years. I think it was created in 65, but they were thinking that it was like a newer type thing and all in that space, but it's been around for a while. So it's one of them cases of things that are out there that people are so ingrained with that they don't know that it has been around much longer than they are actually thinking it has been around, and all in that space. So a lot of times
when I was in New Jersey, when I was in New Jersey, the one thing that I learned is we had, Marriott, Sheraton, Hilton, Hyatt. We had every single brand right in the market. And if you say I said this, I'm going to deny it. A bed is a bed.
Right.
A bed is a bed. And so I sold the Hyatt Hotel, Hyatt in Princeton, which was like 11 years, needed a redo, needed a soft renovation. I mean, against the Marriott, which was up the street, which was brand new, discotheque, Tanger shopping outlet. We had nothing. We had a big old fish tank and a comedy club, right? When I started off, we were like 77% occupancy, and the Marriott was at like 96.
Mm-hmm.
After 3 years, we were at 98%, and the Marriott was at 96%.
Yeah,
that's because I knew how to stay ahead of the trends. Like I wasn't flowing. I was ahead to make sure that when things came up, we were already on it. I already had my network together, so that guess what? It was a flip a switch, and we were there.
But isn't part of the problem that some of the trends that we get caught up in are so snazzy, even in the hotel business and everything, that they are maybe not worth what they are given and everything. I have a friend that went to, and I've been once, but I didn't go stay in a hotel, but I went to Vegas to stay with some friends in that general area, but I do remember that he went a couple times to Vegas and he saw like the kind of snazzy. You look down and you can see the next floors below and all of that space, and he was all thrilled by that. I guess you could be on the dance floor and see what was going on in the fish tanks and all of that space, and that can sound snazzy, but it also can be very expensive. Whereas there was a hotel here, I wish that they still did it, but they used to have like some very simple snack food and maybe some music and other entertainment that was probably cheaply created, but it was like an after hours kind of happy hour type deal and everything that was probably not all that costly because what it was like basically rapid food and all in that space. It was probably cheap to do and all in that space. So we sometimes in the hotel industry get too caught up in the snazzy and don't pay enough attention to the things that can draw people in that might be simple to do the way that they did the happy hour at, I think it was the Omni at the time, but it might have been the Marriott, which is what it is now, and all in that space. But do we sometimes not do enough of catching people's attention with the simple things that can also be rewarding to the customer?
Look, give me either hotel, and I'll surpass my market share. I think it's understanding who your customer is, right? So if you understand the resources that your hotel has, if you understand who your customer is, once again, that's that talking, that's a relationship, that's no assumptions, no prejudging. I don't know everything. And if I can say I don't know everything, then I can learn when I'm talking to you. Right. But if I think I know everything, I'm not going to get anywhere. So I think it just depends on, once again, what resources you have available and what your client needs. I'll tell you a quick story. Promise, quick story. So I had, there was this one account, it's called Nova Nordis, that I really, really wanted. They drove way up the street to the Marriott and we were right across the street, right? So there was a guy, his name was Kevin. He was chief of finance. So I sat down, I was talking to Kevin. I was asking, I said, Kevin, what do you want? Not trying to get his business, right? Because we only had like 1% of the business. What do you want to do in life? Where do you want to be? He's like, well, I want to get this promotion. I want this. He said, we're going for the Malcolm Baldrige Award, blah, 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 blah. So what I did was I Googled win the Malcolm Baldrige Award, you had to have a fitness facility, and they did not have a fitness facility. So I said to Kevin, Kevin, if, maybe there's a way you could just come over, see the hotel, see the fitness facility, the box. It wasn't even probably the biggest my dining room. There was like nothing to it. Mm-hmm. And so I said to Kevin, we started talking. I said, well, hey, look, Kev, I said, maybe there's a way that, I could give you 3-4 keys to the hotel, to the fitness facility. Your guests can use the fitness facility. Your employees can use the fitness facility in the pool whenever they want for 100% of your business. We were getting 1 room night, maybe 3 room nights from Kevin per night. The day we signed that contract, we went up to 140 room nights per night. 140 guests. No, I'm sorry. We're getting 1 to 3 per month. 1 to 3 per month. There we go. I'm sorry. 1 to 3 guests per month. At the end of the month, after I signed that contract, we went up to 140.
Wow.
So imagine going from 3 to 140 because I listened. I didn't go in there and I didn't try to sell him on my hotel or anything. I heard what Kevin wanted. I treated Kevin like a person. I didn't prejudge him. I didn't say, oh, you're in HR. In finance. Kevin was brand new to finance. He didn't have a clue. I said, Kevin, you want to meet some friends? You meet some people in finance? He said, yeah. So you know what I did? I had J&J, Bristol Myers Squibb, Nova Nordis, Martin Marietta, some of the other ones, like the 5 CFOs and the travel managers. I said, let's all have lunch at the hotel. My general manager was having already. He's like, oh, Lord, Kelly, you have them all in the hotel at the same time. They're going to talk about prices. We're going to lose. They all became best friends. And whenever anything happened, they're like, Kelly, I just want to let you know what's going on with J&J. I want to let you know what's going on with Nova Nordis, because I treated them like people.
Right.
Like people, not a sales contract.
Well, they say that some people say that they have a hard time with sales. I know that that's something that I sometimes say, but
that's it. I'm not going to talk anymore.
Yeah, but I know that sales is very important and very much of a thing that we all do to one degree or another, whether we want to say that we are salespeople or not, but it is a reality and all in that space. So I, like I said, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I have to get you back on again in the not too distant future. But as I get all my guests to do it, as you've been noticing, I've been having your website roll across the bottom ever since about the 30-minute mark or all along those lines. But if folks wanted to get in touch with you, or if you have any last minute thoughts that you want to share, and if I do on all the shows, including other shows that you've been on, if you have any message of positivity or hope that you want to give to our global audience, then definitely want you to do that as well. And then we'll get out of here with the same little video with the robot person that started the show, that closes the show with this particular one on Monday and everything. So if you have any ways that folks can reach you, and any thoughts or final thoughts that you want to share, both about what we've been talking about.
Key thing is awareness.
Go ahead.
Oh, my email address is thekellyjones, TheKellye Jones @gmail.com. thekellyjones@gmail.com. Key thing that I want to say is right now is awareness. We just have to start talking and getting the awareness out there. After we get the awareness out there, we can focus on the education. I mean, opportunities out there with regards to our
Kelly just
mental
disappeared
health.
on me, and she was
That we have an opportunity to look into different venues.
You did. The computer did something.
I'm sorry.
The computer did something weird. So if you give that closing remark again, it did not catch all of that at the end. So if you want to give that closing remark one more time, because it didn't catch that.
Okay, what I was going to say is awareness and education are key. Of course, mandates and measurement. But right now, awareness is so important. We just have to let people know that there are options. One of the things I wrote on my article is that ADHD is manageable. PANDAS is curable, treatable. There are solutions. There are opportunities to lose a diagnosis. There are opportunities to have a better quality of life. But if we just keep sending everybody to psychiatrists, right? Because that's our only world. We don't know about, if we're not familiar with neurologists, oncologists, hematologists, immunologists, if we're not aware of the spectrum, then we will think that everything should be handled with a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Complete difference between psychologists and psychiatrists. So what I ask right now is that we try to just really, once again, work on awareness of the options out there, of the different things that are available to people on a broader scope. Just saying like, hey, look, you know what? Look at your medical health options. Everything is not a psychiatrist. Because in order to go to a psychiatrist, in order for a psychiatrist to continue with you, you have to have a diagnosis. Yeah. And some people don't need a diagnosis, but they'll take a diagnosis to make sure that they can continue the care.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And all in that space, did you have a global message that you wanted to give to the global world as well? I mean, a lot of that was U.S. eccentric, but I also noticed an issue in the world as well. So is there, would that same message go for our global community, or is there another message that you want to share with the global community as well?
The global community, same thing as far as awareness. And once again, like I said, America is fourth highest with regards to autism. So there are a lot of countries out there who are have lower autism rates, and so and based on a lot of the medical advice, a lot of the medical forms I bring in are from the UK and Australia, believe it or not. So that's where I get a lot of my research from. So I know that you're doing things in the world. Just please continue to make it accessible so that I and others can share it with individuals here in the U.S. because we need more options for people. This euthanasia, if it's not a wake-up call, it needs to be a wake-up call. Thank you.
Definitely agree with that. Get ready to get out with that 30-second spot that gets us out the same way that we came in. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully I can have another one later on this month or sometime later on this year. But as always, Kelly, you give great conversation, and I always enjoy talking to you, and we'll have to catch up in, as they say, IRL, in real life at some point as well. So definitely looking forward to these great conversations and being able to catch up with you the way that I did that one time that we all saw Hakeem Jeffries together and all in that space. So looking forward to catching you in real life as well as back here on the podcasting world as well. But you always give great insights, and was glad to have you here on Pod TV today. So appreciate you and hope to see you in the not too distant future.
You're a blessing. Thank you.
No problem.